Welcome back. This is Topics in World Literature, Fall 21 semester. This is a two-part talk on introducing Rumi and the Desert Parents, and then we'll spend a full week, just luxuriating like we were sitting, up on top of a mountain or chilling up in Gatlinburg in a hot tub or whatever. We're just going to enjoy. We're going to just take a lazy stroll through these poems of Rumi and the sayings of the Desert Fathers. And my attraction to Rumi is via the American poet Coleman Barks of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Athens, Georgia, retired professor from the University of Georgia. And he's getting up there, but he's still talking about Rumi. And we had the humongous blessing to host a whole Rumi event on Valentine's Day. Rumi is the poet of love. And on Valentine's Day, was it 2019? I think it was 2018 or 2019. We had Coleman Barks here at Tennessee Tech. I'll look it up and tell you what day he came. And it was one of my life goals to bring Professor Barks to campus. And it was a thrill in every regard. I think I really almost wore him out. We should have taken the elevator. He walked all the way to the third floor of Henderson Hall for his first talk. Anyway, love resides not in learning, not in knowledge, not in pages and pamphlets. That's a true idea of Rumi. And we were talking about poetry in my American Lit class this morning. I'll say it to you all. Poetry is the language of experience. It's the language of direct experience of the things that elevate and make life better. And that's why this class is a required class at a Tennessee Tech University. It was a very great contrast between the arts and poetry and music from the hard learning and the engineering and the nursing and the education and the computer science and some of the other economics and some of the other hard majors that you guys have here. But a well-rounded person dives into these things. And here's the thing that we're learning about that you can't learn about, is the mysterious. And love is such a central theme in literature, but it's the one thing that even today we don't even understand how it works. We don't understand how people can be in relationships and be madly in love one minute and then at loggerheads, and hate each other the next, So welcome to part 2 of today's talk, and we're gonna dive right in to learning about Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. Soul receives only from soul its secrets, not from any book or eloquence, nothing else, nothing you can ever hear or ever do. So the poetry of mysticism communicates directly the language of the heart, the language of the soul, things that cannot be said in any other language. We'll be having his birthday here in just a few days. He was born on September 30th, 1207. That makes him, I believe, a Libra like me. I got one coming up in October, 54 young, just still chugging along here. So if he was born in 1207, class, how old, what birthday of Rumi's will we be celebrating on, that's Rumi, R-U-M-I, also known as Maulana. We'll be celebrating his 814th birthday here in just a couple of days. So happy birthday to the most popular poet in America, I've been told, in terms of selling books. And people who know poetry, maybe this is because people like, really famous pop stars like to put Rumi quotes on their Instagram and on their Facebook. But whatever, Rumi is a Middle Eastern Persian poet from the 9th century. From the 13th century. From the 13th century, the most popular poet in the world, probably in the United States. He's huge if you go to the Near East. He is from a section of Islam called Sufi Islam, and one of the debates in Rumi scholarship over the last couple of years is how to talk about him as a Muslim poet, and especially Rumi's popularity in the West among kind of Anglo-descended white people like me. Coleman Barks is like me, just a Presbyterian from Tennessee. Just a Protestant, white boy from Tennessee. So when we talk about Islam, We're talking about one of the three major Abrahamic faiths. They are all come from the same family tree. That's Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. There's a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of assumptions and a lot of stereotypes that people make about Islam as a religion. I'm not an Islamic scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but it's important to remind ourselves that Rumi is rooted in that tradition. He was a teacher and a scholar. He was like a preacher teacher. You know, I kind of think of myself as a bit of a preacher teacher. You know, he professed, but he also taught as well. And and that's the word where the word professor comes from, is the person who professes. But to profess in a religious context is to have some integrity of belief. But what the Sufi kind of track, if you will, in Islam is known for is for ascetic experiences. These is like fasting, putting the spiritual over the material, renouncing the self, not being about you, having these mystical experiences and divine visions. And that really connects us with part one of this lecture, where I tried to introduce us to mysticism in general. I don't know if the Desert Parents were having mystical experiences for sure, but we have a lot of biographical data, and several biographies have been written about Rumi. For sure, Rumi was experiencing exalted spiritual states. And I'm going to, in the short time that I have remaining in this talk, I'm going to get us a little bit into some of the stories that lead to these beautiful sayings and these beautiful poems of Rumi that we're going to be interpreted through Coleman Barks of Athens, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, through his book, The Essential Rumi. That's the textbook we'll be using on next Wednesday for our readings of Rumi. Franklin Lewis said that while Rumi does indeed demonstrate a tolerant and inclusive understanding of religion, he was also, we must remember, trained as a preacher like his father before him, and as a scholar of Islamic law. Rumi did not come to his theology of tolerance and inclusive spirituality by turning away from traditional Islam or organized religion, but through an immersion in it. And as the formal days of the global war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq have ended, technically, we're no longer in active combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of our points in that encounter zone of the Near East has been a relationship. What is the relationship between Judaism and Christianity and Islam? The relationship between the Palestinians and the Israelis today. It emphasizes and amplifies the importance of us to understand this. So as a scholar, what Professor Lewis is reminding us is that when we see Rumi as this very open and very tolerant poet, that it comes out of his faith, not as a rejection of his faith, that he gets to that. And we see that, today in Christianity, you have, various threads and versions of Christianity within the United States that are very, very passionate. And sometimes when you're on one side versus the other side, don't make me break down what those sides are. I'm not going to go there today. And sometimes the people on either side cannot talk around their faith anymore because of their politics, and they forget that the person who is their political adversary, who's also a person of faith, arrived at their strong convictions from their faith, not despite of it. And that's, we start calling people hypocrites. We start saying, well, they're not really, they don't really, they're not genuine or authentic. And that's very dangerous ground when we're talking about other people, right? We can talk about ourselves and say, hey, look, I'm a hypocrite. I don't live up to my values. I don't practice what I preach. I've got a very high ideals and a very, mediocre ability to follow through on them. And so, and I make mistakes. I'm a human being. I'm a flawed and broken vessel. So I can say that about me, but I cannot say, it's not right to say that about you. You get in trouble, actually, when you say that. I know, because I like to run my mouth. You can get in trouble when you talk bad about other people. So we'll see a quote in a second from Barks that will come at it from the other side. But just some of these pictures I was able to find shows how seriously they took these manuscripts. These are actual images of actual Rumi books, from Konya, from Persia, from the area in which he was known and working. So you can just see how incredible and just how beautiful these texts are, and how seriously these people took these texts. One of Rumi's books, the Masnavi, was called the Quran in Persian. I mean, it wasn't like Rumi was writing scripture, but it was like what he was writing gave people access to the religious and to the spiritual and to God at a level comparable to. So you find secondary texts. Some of you might see that in praise and worship music, for example. I think we talked about that briefly when we did our religious survey and things like that. So anyway, so what Barks is on about is he believes that Rumi is capturing what one might say is the essence of all religion, if it's a good religion, right? So, and I'm not saying any religion is a bad religion, but I'm saying if you're a good ambassador of your particular religion, if you're living up to its highest ideals, I just said I've got high ideals, but I never found a way to live up to them. So I'm not a good example, but maybe somebody else is a good example. Barks says, this is how he sees Rumi. He sees Rumi as a broad range of religious awareness, the meditative silence and no mind of Zen, that's part of Buddhism, the open heart and compassion of Jesus. I hope I don't have to tell anyone on the call who that cat was, a Galilean peasant, the Nazarene. Nothing good comes out of Nazareth, the stern discipline of Muhammad, the convivial humor of the Taoists, the crazy wisdom and bright intelligence of the Jewish Hasidic masters. Rumi is a planetary poet, loved the world over for the grandeur of his surrender and for the freedom and grace of his poetry. And maybe, I mean, they're like, he's the Shakespeare of Konya or whatever. He's like a Shakespeare. He's a giant in literature. So he's absolutely worthy to be studied in a world literature course, and to be studied very seriously. Here's some more images of his work. And I don't know of any other Rumi scholars here at Tech. So I'm really glad you signed up for my class because because you're getting to learn about Rumi. And I'm really honored that somebody on the call is going to take on Rumi as a passion. Somebody's going to fall in love with Rumi's poetry, and they're not going to be ashamed to tell your classmates. They're not going to be embarrassed to tell your classmates that, hey, this is something that I'm really into. Once you all start reading this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and your mind is going to be blown. At least a couple of you will get your mind blown by these texts, and you'll be appreciative, not because of the grade A that you're going to get in the class, or because of this class being either too hard or too easy, depending on how you look at it, but just for the fact that we got to learn about this poetry. And the poetry, the source, comes from this beautiful story. And as I'm starting to wind up part 2 of the lecture here, and I don't want to run out of time today, I want to tell you, though, that Rumi's poetry, a lot of it springs from a real friendship that he had. And a lot of the reputation and the legend of Rumi springs from this friendship. So in 1244, so Rumi then is in his late 30s. He's a well-established scholar and teacher, and he's got a following. He's got a group of his own disciples, and a stranger appeared in Konya. And this is kind of like, if you had some really reputable preacher that everybody loved and adored, and he had this whole kind of entourage around him. Maybe he had some fans, even some groupies, right? Big deal. Preacher, and some random smelly kind of persnickety elderly bum walks in, hobos into church, and the teacher starts to ignore his congregation and becomes best friends with this person, and they go off and they go to coffee together, and no one can get any time with the teacher anymore because he's at coffee with this bum, and this bum has something that the teacher wants in terms of spiritual understanding, and he starts to ignore his responsibilities. He goes into rapture over this cat. So that's what happened, and that's Shams of Tabriz. And so the story of Rumi is always linked up with this friendship with this bum, this mystic, this hobo, this traveler, this ne'er-do-well, Shams, who wanders into town. Shams of Tabriz arrived in Konya. Who are you and what are you doing? You must now live what you have been reading about. So Rumi asks Shams, why are you here? And Shams tells Rumi, I'm here to get you to start practicing what you preach. I'm here for you to stop talking about spirituality and to start living spirituality, to stop pontificating religion and start practicing it in your heart. And that's why this friendship, this spiritual friendship, and it's one of those great spiritual friendships, you know, and great books have been written about these kind of comradely friendships that have happened all throughout history. So it's a, you know, it's a bond is formed that will catapult Rumi for the rest of Rumi's career. And so there's just a depiction, artistic rendering of the meeting of Rumi and Shams. One day, Rumi was reading next to a large stack of books. Shams Tabriz, passing by, asked him, "What are you doing?" Rumi scoffingly replied, "Something you cannot understand. This is knowledge that cannot be understood by the unlearned." On hearing this, Shams threw the stacks of books into a nearby pool of water. Rumi hastily rescued the books, and to his surprise, they were all dry. Rumi then asked Shams, "What is this?" To which Shams replied, "Maulana, this is what you cannot understand." And so this idea that religion can be found in a book, even a sacred text, is turned on its nose by this relationship between Shams and Rumi. And they're saying for us all that our religion, if it's worth its salt, is in the bond between human beings that love each other. That is where it's at. And these are between best friends of different generations, of different backgrounds. It's two dudes. No one has speculated that I've read that this was you know, homosexual or anything like that. But when you get two dudes hanging out together, you know, people might talk, you know. Definitely the friends of Rumi were upset because they were jealous that this guy, this teacher, this mystic, this crazy man was captivating Rumi so much that it was distracting from his other responsibilities. Here's a conversation alleged between Kermani and Shams. "I'm looking at the reflection of the moon in a bowl of water." Now, class, watch this one carefully so you don't miss it. Shams says, "Unless you have a boil in your neck, why not look at the sky? Maybe you should see your doctor to be cured so you can see the real thing." And so he's saying, oh, don't admire the reflection in the mirror. Look at the real thing. Don't admire the moon reflected in the lake. Go and turn around and look at the moon itself. Stare into the eyes of the sun, you know. And of course, you're not supposed to stare at the sun, you know, bad things will happen. But this is kind of like a staring at the sun thing. Don't, you know, strip away all illusion. Take away all pretensiveness. You know, don't be pompous and pretentious. Don't get off your high horse and get into the dirt, into the mud, into the real essence of the thing. Shams to Rumi, "I would say I don't want that God. I want a God who has free will. I seek that God. I would tell him to destroy that God of whom he has spoke." And this is, you know, you've heard debates about whether human beings have free will. This is a great, you know, dormitory debate for tonight. You know, if you've, you know, heard of Calvinism and predestination, I mean, you say, people say off the tip of their tongue, God is in control. Well, what exactly do you mean there, you know, fellow breathing entity, you know, sentient being, person of higher consciousness? I mean, what does that actually mean? Are we just robots? Are we just little cogs in the machine? Do I have the decision? Did I have a choice whether to give this lecture or not give this lecture? Do I have a choice to finish this lecture in 1 minute or in 8 minutes? You know, what are we talking about here, right? So so they were having this debate about whether God has free will, and it was proposed, you know, that God might not have free will, that God might be this essence that only behaves to the nature of itself, right? We talk about human nature all the time, and we can't agree on what human beings cannot agree on what human nature is. Well, imagine trying to have that debate about God. That's the kind of stuff that Shams and Rumi would debate about, and they would get so far as to say, well, if you don't have the right understanding of who this God is, get rid of that God, right? You know, if your idea of God isn't true, better that you don't have that idea of God. This is a big deal, y'all. This is some serious stuff. So I was watching a show on not Netflix, Apple TV the other day, and this character plays a 5th grade teacher, and he's gets into one of these discussions with his niece, and the parents, his sister and her husband, are really religious. He's not. And it starts this huge fight with his sister because he starts teaching theology to his niece without, permission. She's like 5, and they, basically the character in the TV show basically says God is like a pretend character, and it sent the whole show in to orbit. And so there's 2 separations. There's a separation where Shams leaves and then comes back, and then there's a separation where Shams leaves and never comes back again. It's believed that he was murdered by one of Rumi's devotees out of jealousy, and the grief that Rumi feels being separated from Shams, he does not choose to be separated from Shams, is unbelievable. It's a howling, roaring pain. He roared like thunder. He skirted madness. It drives him crazy with longing that his best friend has left him. And to cope with his grief at his friend leaving, Rumi dances. He dances to deal with his grief. He dances day and night. He began to dance like a spinning wheel. And Rumi and Shams come from this tradition of Middle Eastern dancers called the dervishes. They're called the whirling dervishes, and they spin in circles as a form of devotion. Well, I like to go see music. I think I said I was going to go to Moon River this weekend. I like to see jam bands, Fish, the Grateful Dead, all that kind of stuff. And I love it. It is my form. It is absolutely my form of devotion. It's cooler when we're in the classroom and we do it, and you can see it. I just knocked a picture off the wall. See, I definitely didn't have room to do this here. I just knocked John Prine off the wall. That is a sin at my house. I'm so sorry, John Prine. Let's see if I can get you back up on the wall. So anyway, spinning in circles is a form of spiritual devotion to good music, and they have a formal way to do this. If you're at Moon River this weekend, don't look for me, because I'm an old man. We ain't got no rhythm, I'll just be like, anyway, I'll be twirling around for fun. But it's a form of spiritual devotion. It's a form of prayer, and what a great thing. It's not great that his friends killed Shams, probably. It's not great that he lost his best friend. This is a horrible thing, to lose your best friend, but to have the medicine of prayer and to teach yourself how to dance. I remember sharing this story once in a support group, and this person getting so mad at me, and they're like, "I'm mad and I'm not dancing. Don't tell me to dance." Fine, that might work for you, but I'm grumpy. And I'm going to stay grumpy, and don't you dare tell me to dance. I might still be grumpy, but I'm going to dance. I don't care what kind of mood I'm in on Saturday when the bands start playing over there at Chattanooga down by the river. I'll be dancing. Let the beauty we love be what we do. It's not about the prize, the trinket, the award. It's definitely not about the picture of John Prine on my wall in my office. It's about John Prine's music. It's not about these diplomas from Vanderbilt behind me. It's what I invested in life to study religion and theology at Vanderbilt Divinity School in 2011 to 2015. It's about that thing, finding that convergence between your vocation, your calling, your job, whatever, and your truest heart's desire. That's the trick, class, is let the beauty we love be what we do. So today we've had a whirling dervish introduction to Rumi and the Desert Parents, and to the mysticism of poetry and sayings. And next week we'll get into the texts themselves. We'll do the Desert Parents on Monday at 1:00, and then we'll be doing Rumi next Wednesday afternoon. And by next week, I hope to have written your assignment sheets. I've been neglecting that, but we're getting well into September. By next week, it'll be the middle of September, and your deadlines will start coming up, end of the month, beginning of October. So I promise to get those assignment sheets together. Thank you all so much for getting on the call. We have time for just a couple of questions as we wrap up another day.